What are we doing to make sure that Alaska is self-reliant? And developing gas in place and adding value to resources in place, that's self-reliance. That helps cut off some of the colonial mindset that we're stuck in, that other people need to do things for us. So that's significant. The other thing is, this gas pipeline, which they're promoting now, it's 8 years before it's ready. What are we going to do for energy in the meanwhile? What's the future presence of a gas line going to do for the ability to find investment in things like waste to energy or community solar or wind, or there's all these hydro projects that are being promoted? What's going to happen to the funding for that? You got to do something that builds the community of Alaska back together again. And that, I think, is really critical, because there's 750,000 Alaskans, but there's not enough of us to fight and thrive. We can fight or thrive. And so we got to find a way of coming together.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is former Anchorage Mayor Ethan Berkowitz. After law school in San Francisco, he moved to Alaska to clerk for a judge in 1990 and eventually became an assistant district attorney in Anchorage. In 1996, he ran for an open state House seat in West Anchorage, and he served in the state legislature for 10 years, 8 as the House Minority Leader. In 2006, he ran for lieutenant governor with Tony Knowles at the top of the ticket, but they lost to Sarah Palin and Sean Parnell. In 2008, he unsuccessfully challenged Don Young for the U.S. House seat, and in 2010, he ran as the Democratic candidate for governor, losing to Republican Sean Parnell. In 2015, he was elected Anchorage mayor after defeating Republican Amy Demoboski by the largest margin in municipal history, and he was easily reelected in 2018. In October 2020, he resigned from office after a consensual but inappropriate texting relationship came to light between him and an Anchorage Television News Anchor. Recently, Ethan has been a frequent co-host on Andrew Halcro's podcast, With All Due Respect. And he has also been working on a fiber optic cable that would connect Asia to Europe via the Arctic. Ethan Berkowitz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's start with your early life. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in San Francisco, and as I stayed there until I went to college, and then I served some time down in the Antarctic, and went to law school and came to Alaska. And as we say, I got to Alaska as soon as I could.
Backing up, what did your parents do?
My dad was a business consultant. He worked for himself. My mom worked also in a family export business that my grandfather had started. And my mom and her family came over in 1939. Hitler invaded Poland. They were Dutch Jews living in Belgium. And they said, it's time to leave. And they were gone within a month.
And what about your dad? How did he get to San Francisco?
My dad's family is from the Middle West. He grew up in Illinois and in the farmland outside Mattoon, Illinois. He was in the Air Force and at some point came through San Francisco. After he got out of active duty, he decided that's where he wanted to be, and he settled in San Francisco.
Were your parents political people?
Not overtly. I mean, I had, and I guess have, because they're still around, we had family friends who'd been in politics in San Francisco. One was a liberal Republican. That was my Uncle John Bardis. One was a sort of center, right of center independent guy named Quentin Kopp, who became a state senator and had been a representative. So it's kind of, I remember hanging out in literature for them, but my family was not overtly political. And
was it assumed that you were going to be a Democrat when you left the House?
I would never have considered doing anything else. I mean, I go back on my grandparents' side on my father's parents, and they were old school Midwestern Democrats.
I mean, your dad was a businessman.
Yeah.
So sometimes they veer from their parents' politics.
But we were also, we were Jews, and the experience of Jews of that generation in particular is that the Democratic Party was a more welcoming place.
Did you grow up religious?
No, very secular. I was bar mitzvahed, but I did it at home. But we were very secular, but very culturally Jewish.
And did you know your grandparents?
Yes. My mother's parents both lived in the area, and so I spent a lot of time with them growing up. My dad's mom lived in Kansas City, and his father had passed just before I was born, but yeah, I knew them.
And your maternal grandparents, they're the ones who escaped from Nazi Germany?
Well, yes. That's when they came over in 1939.
Were they young? I mean, I don't know. Did you talk to your grandparents about what happened in Germany?
They didn't talk. I mean, they were Dutch Jews, but they were the only ones in the family that survived the Holocaust. I had one aunt who survived in hiding and one friend of the family who went to one of the camps and was ultimately traded, but for medical supplies. No, they didn't talk about it.
How'd you learn about it?
We just knew. We just knew there was no great grandparents. There were no aunts and uncles. There were no cousins.
And did you know also not to talk about it? Like you don't ask grandma about that?
It just never really came up. I mean, I remember one time, the closest it came up is my aunt who had spent the war in hiding had a seizure, and we called the paramedics and they came and they showed up in uniform, and she wouldn't talk to him. She wouldn't talk to him. She was a great aunt. She wouldn't talk to him. And but these are the lessons that stick with you as a young person. You remember this, is the police or a uniform can be dangerous to somebody, and you need to make sure that that people have good experiences when they encounter uniforms.
So when your aunt wouldn't speak to the uniformed person, did you instinctively know why that was happening, or did you ask your parents, or
figured it out? I mean, I'd done enough reading. I knew what was going on. I knew that people hadn't survived. I knew that.
I mean, I'm trying, like, I know I'm kind of dwelling on it, but
that whole experience, these are the sort of things that shape you as a young person. I mean, there's missing pieces.
Do you have siblings?
I have siblings.
Did you guys talk about it?
No. I mean, we grew up at things are pretty idyllic as a child. But, in retrospect, you can see where the shadow of history leans over you. It was there. I mean, there were certain expectations about what we needed to do and what we had to do that were there.
Did you go to Harvard for undergrad?
I did.
How was that the trajectory?
For me, my father had gone to Harvard, so I really contemplated about 2 or 3 different schools, and fortunately I had a good enough high school experience where they looked favorably on me and let me in.
What was your Harvard experience like?
Harvard's in the news a lot these days, and the Harvard that you see that's stereotyped and distorted isn't the Harvard that I went to. I was fortunate. The rooming group I was with had people from all over the country, all over the world. I had a roommate from Kansas, a roommate from Buffalo, New York, a roommate from Long Island, one from India, one from Boston, and one from Nigeria and London. We're good friends to this day. So my experience there was incredible.
Are any of them famous?
Famous, I don't know. One was an appellate judge in Kansas. One was a newspaper columnist in Memphis. One keeps getting awards for being a leading Black businessman in New York. So they all have various degrees of notoriety.
We have some Ivy Leaguers in Alaska. They never talk about it. It's really like one of those things, like a dirty little secret that they went to the Ivy League.
I think people do. One of the nice things about coming to Alaska is people judge you on who you are and what you do at that time. And I think some of that's that ethos that you see in Ivy Leaguers who are here. But it's also about what you are instead of what credentials you have. And, I did the thing. People, where do you go to school? Oh, back east. Where? Oh, Boston. Where? Cambridge. It's like you can do that sort. But ultimately, people should judge you on the caliber of your thinking and the achievements that you've had, rather than the school that you went to.
You mentioned you went to work in Antarctica. Did that happen before or after Harvard?
After Harvard. I did my undergraduate thesis on the political economy of Antarctica. After 100 pages, I concluded that there really wasn't one. But I wound up getting a job down on the ice, and I worked in the administrative center there. That first season I was there, I delivered mail, unloaded planes, moved SEALs off a runway. It was pretty diverse, incredible experience. In fact, it was really formative for how I practiced politics when I got here. I just saw how everything was interconnected, and it was a fantastic experience.
And what year were you in Antarctica?
I was there 83, 84. I went back again in 86. I was a guide we were laying in fuel supplies for what became the first private flight to the South Pole, and that was on the Antarctic Peninsula. And then I went back again in 93, 94 as the U.S. Antarctic Conservation Act enforcement officer
Did your experience in Antarctica get you thinking about living in cold weather climates that in some way connected you to Alaska?
No, I wound up coming to Alaska because my sister had a friend who'd been a law clerk up here, and she said apply to a clerkship here, and I wound up doing that. The judge that hired me was Alex Brenner, fantastic jurist, incredible man. He was in the Bay Area interviewing people, and this was right after the big Loma Prieta earthquake. And so I was cleaning up rubble and invited him over, and we wound up meeting, and he took pity on me and thought that I could be a suitable law clerk for him.
Why did you think you wanted to be a lawyer?
Well, I tried a bunch of other things. I worked a little bit in journalism. I traveled around a little bit. I got a graduate degree in, I thought...
In economics, right?
Well, my undergraduate degree I had a double degree in government and economics, but my graduate degree was in polar studies. I went to the University of Cambridge in England. They have the Scott Polar Research Institute, but that didn't really readily translate to something that I could make a living at. And so I've always been interested in law, interested in doing things that used your brain that way. So that seemed like a suitable avenue for me to try. Plus my dad kept telling me, Ethan, you need a trade. So law became it. I came up here in 1990.
Tell us about your first 10 years in Alaska.
It was a great experience. I had the clerkship, and clerkship was a good experience. You have people who are new to Alaska, you explore everywhere. There's a network. I don't think I spent a weekend in town until the snow fell. And then I got to travel all around. And after my year of clerkship, I was a district attorney, assistant district attorney for a couple of years.
In Anchorage?
Based out of Anchorage, but because I was the young single guy, I volunteered to go anywhere they needed somebody. So I also got to work around the state, in Sandpoint, down on the Kenai, just all over Cordova. It was also a terrific experience. As a young lawyer, my job was to follow the letter of the law as it applied to the facts of the case. And all the things about the native claims or subsistence, all these larger pictures, I hoped that people farther behind me would correct. And, in retrospect, having learned a lot more about ANCSA, about subsistence, about ANILCA, I might have done things slightly differently, but the system's not set up for that. And it's also, it's one of the lessons about the criminal justice system is it doesn't always apply justice. And
you're a prosecutor.
I was a prosecutor.
And I think, the stereotype is that prosecutors are tough on crime, and that, if you were to put party labels on it, prosecutors are Republican and defenders are Democrats. And and that's clearly not the case, but there is that stereotype around it.
I think that's a misperception. I think good prosecutors want to do justice rather than notch wins. And you don't see a lot of what happens where cases are dismissed or pleas are entered into. And when politics intrudes on the practice of law, particularly on the practice of criminal law, that's where it distorts the process. And the measure in Alaska is we have an incredibly high rate of incarceration. We have incredibly high recidivism. The ability to protect people who are chronically victimized in the state isn't what it should be. And efforts at criminal justice reform are really important to make sure that fewer people are victimized, fewer people go into the system, that a more apt justice is served. We are not there. We don't have that kind of deep thinking. Every now and then they'll make some effort to that. A couple of years back, some of what you talked about where there was going to be people released from prison and then they were going to go through rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. Well, the rehabilitation piece never...
We didn't have it.
We didn't have it, and we didn't fund it, and then we said...
It didn't work.
It didn't work. But that's been the experience everywhere we go. People want the quick fix. It is not a quick fix. The underlying social dynamics that drive crime, they're deep-seated, and it's going to take time to fix them. But if you look historically or look at what the current trends are, the amount of crime is going down because some of these long-term efforts are bearing fruit.
How did you go from being a young lawyer, working all over the state, doing interesting cases, to deciding to run for office?
So I worked down in the Antarctic. I took a season and worked down in the Antarctic.
You said 93, 94?
93, 94. And I came back and I wanted to meet new people. So someone said there's a Democratic convention over at West High, which was just up the hill. And so I went there and someone said, well, there's nobody running in this district, Ethan, you should run. And I thought, well, I'm not really working for anybody. It seems like a good time. This could be a great experience. And I threw my hat in the ring.
What year was that?
I was 96.
And how old were you?
I was 34.
34. What district were you?
It was a district that was basically Turnagain, parts of Spenard, and downtown.
So West Anchorage.
West Anchorage.
Yeah. And you thought, okay, why not?
Yeah, that would be a great way of meeting people and learning a lot about Alaska. And I wound up walking the district. I knocked that.
Whose district was it?
It belonged to Cynthia Toohey was the representative before I was here.
You just said knock the district.
Yeah.
I didn't know that people really did that when I first ran for office.
Well, they had, I will say Johnny Ellis in particular was very helpful to new candidates to say, this is what you need to do and this is how to do it. Make sure you get Corex signs, you want fender washers on those signs so people aren't going to steal them. When you get things printed, you want to make sure that your logo is on both sides of it's printed so it doesn't matter. I mean, Johnny was great at that sort of thing, and it was really helpful. But you also had to walk.
So you walked the district, you got elected.
Yep, 28 votes.
You won by 28 votes.
Yep. It was an open seat. I ran against Casey Sullivan, who's the son of Mayor Sullivan and brother of other Mayor Sullivan.
He must have been very young then.
He was pretty young, and I was pretty young, and my slogan was "Experience Counts." So it was just a way of pointing out that I was slightly older than he was.
That's funny.
But I think it wound up being a good campaign for him. I believe he met his wife during the campaign, and so everything worked out for everybody's benefit.
And you hadn't met your wife yet?
I had not met her.
How did you meet your wife?
I met her the next campaign. I had come home prior to a special session, and they were playing music over at the Fly-By-Night, the old Fly-By-Night club, and I met Mara there.
I'm asking this because I just had this conversation with Ken Alper, who talked about meeting his wife and how...
Jill.
Yes, and how there was a lot of pressure on her that she needed to marry a Jewish man. And he also said that he'd grown up very secular, not very religious at all. But then he said, but I always kind of assumed I'd marry a Jewish woman. You grew up secular in San Francisco. I mean, did you know that you were going to marry a Jewish woman?
No, marriage, just things clicked very easily. My parents hoped I would, but there was no extreme pressure. They made their wantings, their desires known, but it was up to me who I married.
So got elected in 96, sworn in 97. I know that you were the minority leader for 8 out of your 10 years. So you were not the minority leader for the first 2 years.
No, I tell people I have the dubious distinction of being the longest serving minority leader in state history. And that is a title that I lord over Beth Kurtula because I beat her by a couple of months because she took a job in the White House.
Yeah. Talk about the first few years.
The first session I was there was very much, there was a lot. It was over partisan posture bills, flag burning, partial birth abortion, gay marriage, those sort of things designed to smoke liberals out. And once you make a decision, I hope this has been an experience you've had, is once you figure out who you are, you just vote that way. And you're not intimidated by it. And so I think the efforts to pressure me and the other, because there's a couple of us that were young Turks at the time, it backfired on the Republicans because it just made us tougher and more certain about who we were. I think one of the things that was different then too is, I guess now you all go down on Monday or Tuesday and come back Thursday or Friday. And we go down for a month at a time. And so we spent time together. And
you are accidentally sticking your finger in a wound. The issue I have now a 13-year-old, but I started, he was 9. There are other people who have younger children. And so there is a lot of
commuting.
There's a lot of commuting and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of guilt.
Yes.
About, I always fly home Friday night and I fly back to Juneau on Sunday night. I always fly back on Sunday night because I never want, it happens at least once a session where there's a problem with that Monday morning flight and you're missing floor session.
Yeah, I remember a problem with one of those Monday morning flights that was my lesson of never travel with only your suit on. Because we overflew to Petersburg and I wound up buying a set of clothes at the hardware store there that I had for a long time. But it was also a great time. That overflight I remember really clearly is we wound up taking the ferry up from Petersburg and on the trip were Vic Coring, a pretty conservative legislator out of the Valley, and we got to know him a little bit better. And he had a friend of his who was the mayor of Wasilla, a woman named Sarah Palin. People might have heard of her, but we got to know each other that way. And I think that's the way Alaska is supposed to be, is you take these diversions to eating pie and Sitco, wherever it is you wind up going, and you sit down and you talk to people.
Well, you mentioned Vic Coring, and so the Vico scandal happened while you were in the legislature. In fact, I've had a lot of come to Jesus moments myself the past couple of months dealing with the gas line, because I gave a speech before I voted yes on the House bill the first time, where I quoted Bill Allen and Eldon Mulder and the VP of ConocoPhillips at the time, and used that to vote yes. And afterwards, I was like, that is crazy that I just quoted those particular three people as being my justification for voting yes. I'm really grateful. You and Andrew Halcro's podcast, with all due respect, have done just a lot of great episodes about the gas line. And I'm really grateful for the work that the more skeptical Senate has done. Mm-hmm. But anyway, you're there for all of that. Talk about some of that.
I recall before it happened that we were talking about the per diem people should get. And I remember leaning over and talking to two people, both who were subsequently indicted, and saying, look, if we don't get the per diem raised, this area becomes ripe for corruption, because people couldn't make do with childcare or commuting.
And I think your salary was like $26,000 or something.
$24,000.
$24,000. Yeah.
But I wound up, what set me off then, and I guess what I had a measure of attention that was given, is we had some floor amendments, and lobbyists came and pressured people on the floor, and they moved to rescind and change their votes. And I gave a pretty scathing speech about this being our floor, meaning the legislators' floor, and lobbyists aren't supposed to lean over the railing and tell people what to do. And I believe that firmly.
We absolutely had this happen this year. Okay. We absolutely had. We had, and I mean, I'm not saying anything out of turn. It's a public gallery. People can see who are there. They can see every at ease with legislators rushing over to find out. And you had Glenn Farn, AGDC, and the governor's office all represented in the front row of the Peratrovich Gallery.
Yep. I think it's up to the legislators to remember who they work for. And that's the people. Going to check with the lobbyist, going to check with the governor, you're sacrificing the independence of the legislative branch when you do that. You're giving up your required checks and balances. And that, to me, is incredibly problematic. The legislature is a separate branch of government. It has to act that way. And you have a bicameral system in Alaska. You have a Senate and a House, and each one of those is supposed to do its job. The ponderousness of the process is one of the things that protects the public's interest.
Well, Ken Alpert talked about AGEA. No, actually, even the 2013, 2014 gas line proposal with ConocoPhillips and BP and ExxonMobil, and having those folks in the room and speaking on the record. But he said the difference is that, those companies had invested in Alaska. Mm-hmm. They had built infrastructure. They had given back. And so he said, in some ways, I felt like they have a right to offer an opinion. He's like, that's not true today. We're not dealing with a company that has put hundreds of millions of dollars into our state. And maybe we shouldn't have had ConocoPhillips and BP telling people how to do the bill in 2013, 2014.
Look, I'm incredibly skeptical about the Glen Farm proposal. I wish them well. I hope we have a gas line. I don't think it's the answer that people pretend it is. It's not going to solve the energy problem in South Central. There are a lot of real, genuine energy answers that can happen and happen sooner and happen cheaper. But the gas line is not it. And then if you look at the other piece of this, as you point out, BP and Conoco and Exxon, they had invested in Alaska. They knew the business here, and they had control of the gas. So they had vested interest in making the process happen. Glen Farn is a conduit at best, and conduits need to go get financing, and they need to make sure that a project is bankable. I mean, if Glen Farn or AGDC went to a bank or an investment agency and said, we want to finance this project, and it was a viable project, it would be financed.
100%. I also want to talk about the fact that you had a whole ad about building a gas line when you ran for governor in 2010.
It was a sub-theme of everything.
Yeah. And, in a way, when I watched your ads, I'm super grateful that
I don't know who did
your
that.
gubernatorial website is up in 2010. I watched all the ads. I watched interviews that were edited for your website. It's incredible.
Yeah, I don't know who did it or how it stays alive, but I'm not messing with it.
But you have the gas line as part of your campaign. And I couldn't help but think that the person doing that ad would be voting yes with us in the House right now, just based on the sort of optimistic, we need this gas line. We have so much less oil flowing through taps. We need to do the next big thing. Gas line is the way to go.
That was then. I would say the circumstances have changed. I think a gas line would be great, but we need energy, and gas line's not providing energy. The other thing is, and maybe this is just because of what I've been doing in the last couple of years, gas line is not the most lucrative use of the gas. I mean, I keep asking people for help running what the numbers are on this, but our rough calculations are that a data center would use substantially less gas and generate substantially more revenue to the state. And you could do multiple data centers. So there are options. And this is also part of the challenge I have watching how this administration is dealing with these problems. It's just one at a time. And having been a mayor, having been an executive, you've got to be able to do everything all at once. And if you can't do it, you need to hire different people or more people.
I want to bounce back to time in the legislature.
Okay.
Did you know that people were taking bribes? I
didn't know it overtly. It was so, I just thought that's the way legislatures worked, is that people came in, lobbyists did this, they did that. It was pretty open. It wasn't that secretive.
And
I also think that, the FBI went and picked on, and law enforcement, they did what they always do in a criminal enterprises. They picked on the easiest folks to go after. But the more insidious problems, they're deeper than just, the few legislators that they were able to get. And I feel bad for them. They're some of the people they picked up are friends of mine to this day. And I just think that the world landed very hard on them. The bigger problem is that Alaska has this belief that we need other people to develop our resources, and we need outside interests to tell us how. We need the federal government, we need the oil companies, we need the financiers. We don't need all of those. We can do these things ourselves. We just need the moxie to go do it.
by the way, I'll just play the ad.
This is the Alaska Gas Line Inducement Act. Sean Parnell has given TransCanada and Exxon $500 million for a gas pipeline, but didn't require them to build it. Sean Parnell got rolled. I'm Ethan Berkowitz, and if you think Sean's the guy to get it done after 30 years of waiting, then vote for him. I don't. We should build an all-Alaska pipeline ourselves, with all Alaska workers, and that's not getting done. Alaska isn't a place where we sit around and wait for anybody, and neither should your governor.
You do say that you want a gas line built by Alaskans, owned by Alaskans. And that is what Senator Kathy Gaisel said on your podcast in some way, shape, or form a couple of days ago, basically pointing out that the proposal by Glenfarne is not that.
No.
That it would be bringing in enormous amounts of workforce from the lower 48, particularly the highest paid workforce, and that those folks would be taking their paychecks out of Alaska.
It's like I've said it many times. It's like exporting resource, importing workforce, bad economic model.
You know what I'm supposed to ask you about is Ben Stevens.
So people love this story. So we're in a special session, I think the second or third special session about the defined benefit system, where we're moving away from the defined benefit system.
So this would have been toward the end of your time.
Into my time there, Ben was the Senate president. I was the minority leader in the House. There was 12 of us in the House, and we were jamming them up. We were stopping them because we were making good arguments. We had good support in the majority. And so Ben, who was, the two of us, the people thought we were two little bantams that should just be locked in a cage fight at some point. But one day I'm walking down the hallway and Ben yells after me. He says, "You little prick." And I went up to him and said, "You meant to say that I have a small caucus." So, I mean, but that was the time. I mean, I appreciated that because, Benny, unfortunately he's not with us anymore, but we could have these kind of disagreements and still do things together, and had a respect for people's positions. And I hope we can get back to that. I mean, not just in Alaska, but in the country.
You left the legislature in 2006.
Yep.
You ran for Don Young's seat in 2008.
I ran with Tony Knowles in 2006.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. So you were lieutenant governor 2006.
But before Tony got in, there was a bunch of us 30-something, 40-somethings who were jockeying for governor. And we had.
And that was your first serious foray.
Statewide. And I mean, we had good debates. We would go places and, we were all kinds of friends. Eric Croft was there, Andrew Halcro, I think Ralph Samuels. There was a bunch of us younger folks that were out there doing it. And we had good debate and we got along. And I think we showed how politics can happen at its best. And Sarah Palin also at that time.
And so I have interviewed Andrew Halcro about this race and about Frank Murkowski being an extraordinarily unpopular governor. John Binkley is sort of being what you thought would have been like the front runner challenger.
Yep.
And I've talked to John Binkley about that. And then Sarah Palin being the anti-establishment, let's go after this corrupt oil people. Really, I made the joke, I think with Andrew, that I don't know, I didn't vote in that election, but I feel like if I just looked at their platforms on paper, I probably would have voted for Sarah Palin.
Yeah, she got a lot of support, and it's really different how people are when you know them before they become something. Like I remember Sarah and I were the only two candidates who showed up for a debate at the Captain Cook one day, and there might have been three people in the audience, two of whom, one was my daughter, the other was her daughter. And so, that's...
And I'm assuming that your daughter would have been pretty young then.
She was pretty young then.
Like six. Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably not going to be asking the hardest questions.
No, the kids ask the hardest questions. They ask, trust me, they ask the hardest questions because they don't expect a certain answer. They want a real answer.
Okay. Did you resign or not run for re-election?
Because I didn't run then because my kids were young, and it was sort of an up or out sort of thing. In 10 years, I thought in the legislature was enough, and so running for governor seemed like a thing. I mean, I wanted to do. Then Tony Knowles jumped in. I dropped down and ran for lieutenant governor, and then that didn't work out.
Eric Croft was running then as well. Yep. I've also talked to him about this. Yeah, so you were second place. So you got the lieutenant governor's spot in front.
Yes, I was. In all those races, I tell people I have the distinction of being a silver medalist for a lot of statewide offices.
And your friendship with Andrew Halcro had started in the legislature, and did you maintain it during that gubernatorial run in 2006?
I mean, the thing is, this was one of the nice parts about having served in a period of time and having done the fiscal policy caucus. We forged some real bonds and real friendships that I think endure. And it's one of the nice things about Alaska is the partisan fights that you engage in, they fade over time. You can't remember the details of them. And what you remember are the kindnesses that people exhibited, just sharing meals and just the kindnesses that you have, human kindnesses.
Okay, so I have to point out a paradox.
Okay.
Because you mentioned that your kids were little, and so it was like, so I was going to get out of the legislature, but you were running for governor.
Yeah.
And then in 2008, you ran for Congress against Don Young. Well, I mean, either of those were going to be busier than the 4 months in the legislature.
Yes, that was a little, what do they call, cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don Young was extremely unpopular in 2008, and you had a real shot.
I did have a real shot at him. There's a couple of things that happened in that race. First of all, Mark Begich and Ted Stevens were running. Stevens got indicted. And what happened was you could watch the support go from, we can only afford to lose one of them. And as
So you feel like if Ted Stevens hadn't been indicted and he was like a sure thing re-election, that the protest vote would have been for you.
Probably that's what the voting shows. Look, Mark Begich ran a great campaign then. He earned his win. There was things that I wouldn't do. There was some personal attacks against Don Young that the advisors suggested I would not do that. I mean, I knew Don Young. We got to be friends during that campaign. We maintained a friendship afterwards. But I think Alaska is too small a place to get intensely personal in campaigns.
I guess I know about Don Young's campaigns after that, in like the 10 years following, because of my Senator Forrest Dunbar running against him, because of my friend Elise Galvin running against him. So there's part of me that I know some stories from that where he did not become friends with those people.
No.
He was not nice.
Don was Don. He was Uncle Don. And, but I just remember getting stuck at the Kenai airport one day with them. We were on a flight, waiting for a flight that got delayed, and just sitting around chewing the fat with him and his wife, Lou. And, you just get to know people a little bit. And I could not be as venomous as the advisors suggested I be, because Don had some issues with some campaign contributions at the time. And that's just not how I want to run a campaign. I wanted to run a campaign that was about what I was for and where I wanted to go. So, tactical decision, but it's one I'm comfortable with to this day.
And then 2010...
Ran for governor.
And you were the candidate running against Parnell, who was in some ways the incumbent because Palin had resigned.
Yep.
And that's the website that's still up where you can go and watch the ads. And that was also the ad where you got hit by the
backhoe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have it. It's on the website, so you can watch you get hit. It's the outtake.
Yes.
And I look at it and I'm like, wow, it looks like it hit you really hard. My staff, who didn't know that I was researching and I just said I was interviewing you, said, well, ask him about almost getting killed doing that.
It wasn't that bad, but I will tell you that as soon as that ad came out, my friends in labor were like, you never do that. Never stand next to a backhoe that way. And where the hell was your helmet?
Yeah.
And so I'm now very cautious about standing next to backhoes and wearing helmets at all times. But it was like getting body blocked by a very large human being.
And you were, it's interesting coming out of you saying that you were going to go certain places in your campaign against Don Young. I felt like you were pretty tough on Parnell. That was a pretty tough campaign.
It was issue-based. It was totally issue-based. And, we gained a lot of traction with that stuff. It was not a good time to be a Democrat or a Democratic candidate statewide in Alaska. And because
this was like a red wave.
It was red wave.
After Obama had been elected.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we made real traction. I mean, people like Paul Jenkins wrote this great op-ed saying Berkowitz sounds like the guy who's got a plan for Alaska, and that's he's saying some things that need to be said, because the politics that I like to practice is I'm progressive on the social issues, but I'm incredibly pragmatic when it comes time to solving problems that you need to. What do you do about a fiscal plan? What do you do for energy? Let's have answers that work as opposed to ideologically driven policy statements.
And I guess it was probably the red wave that you got like 38% of the vote.
I got 38%. So what happened was, it was also the first election where Citizens United weighed in, because we were there, we were close, we were neck and neck. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden there's money coming in from Texas and from Michigan that otherwise wouldn't have been allowed into the state. And I went from being a reasonable alternative to being Barack Obama's clone.
That's really 3 big campaigns in a row that you lost. Your kids, I guess, were like between the ages of 6 and 12, at least your daughter.
Yep.
I've never run statewide races, and I knock on wood, I haven't lost, but I've only run.
Losing is not fun.
Yeah. So talk about losing, talk about what that was like at home, and were you trying to work as a lawyer? How were you supporting your family?
No, I wasn't working as a lawyer. I did some consulting work in the meanwhile. So that was how I was supporting the family. And I had some real estate investments that I was working on. Losing is not fun. You go from, this is one of the things why I'm always very leery when I meet elected people who describe themselves by their title. I'm Senator so-and-so. I'm represent. No, you are so-and-so who is a senator. You are so-and-so who is a representative. Your identity is separate than your title. And you find that out dramatically when you lose because people don't answer your phone. People that you thought were greatly concerned, they're not greatly concerned with who you are. They're concerned with what you were. And obvious lesson, but it's...
You did the radio show, Bernadette and Berkowitz. What was the decision making behind doing a radio show with Bernadette Wilson? And
so I think what happened there was Bernadette was doing a radio show. Dan Sullivan, Mayor Dan, suggested that you need a counterbalance
to make it interesting.
To make it interesting. And I was sort of free enough to be a counterbalance at that time.
And how often did y'all do the show? And
I think
was it a good experience?
We did it every day for a while. It was a good experience for a while. I'll leave it at that.
Because it got very controversial towards the end. Amy Demoboski ended up being in the runoff with you for mayor and was obviously using comments by you from the Bernadette and Berkowitz show as part of her campaign. And I assume that that's the part where like being on that show became more of a liability than a fun.
Well, I was, once I decided to run for mayor, I was not on the show anymore. I think things that I said on the show were taken out of context. They were politicized, and they were done so in a way that was, I think, I didn't anticipate coming from someone who I had considered a friend.
Bernadette or Amy or both?
Bernadette.
Oh.
And then having it spin up with Jerry Prevost into some
enormous controversy.
So it was. This was just not how a talk show should have been twisted, particularly by someone.
Well, what I find interesting about that, again, as somebody who in some ways is sort of an objective observer doing this research the Saturday night before I interview on a Sunday, is seeing that 2010 gubernatorial campaign where I felt like you really slick and polished, good ads, hard hitting, going after Parnell, and you got 38%. And then I'm reading about the first mayoral campaign and being like, man, Demoboski has got him screwed. You know, I mean, like because of all of this controversy with the Anchorage Baptist Temple, and yet you won. I think she got like 38%. Like, I mean, the tables were turned.
It was the largest margin of any mayoral election.
Which is amazing. And I guess like speak to that, because I think some of it has to do with Anchorage being a different electorate than the state as a whole.
It did. And I also, running for mayor is a different experience than running statewide. People that are in the bowl have much greater familiarity with me. And, you know, we ran a campaign that was optimistic, and it was about where the city can go, where the city should go. And I think that resonated a lot more. You know, we were able to accomplish a lot of what we set out to do.
Mark Begich has said that being mayor of Anchorage is the second most powerful position in Alaska politics.
What does he think is more powerful?
The governor. So, I mean, but in a way I think of it as like, it is sort of like the mini governor because it's like half the population.
It's the best job. Being a mayor is the best job in politics because you can actually get things done. And you can get up in the morning and figure out what you want to go do and then go do it. As opposed to, you know, I love being in the legislature. Legislature was really fun. You know, you have access to all kinds of information. You're involved in vigorous debate, but you don't really accomplish anything. You vote for things and then your work is over. You can count on others to carry it out. Being governor, you're not as close to the people. And as Bill Walker would say, you know, when we'd be at some event and, you know, there'd be all the firefighting equipment. He goes, God, mayors have such great toys. So being mayor is the great job, and you can really make a difference. And in Anchorage, I think we did make a difference.
So something I've observed, you know, I got involved in politics at the local level, going to assembly meetings and paying attention during Dave Bronson's term. And I was all wrapped up in Anchorage politics with no eye on state politics at all. So something that's been really fascinating is serving in the State House, is to hear how dismissive some legislators can be of assembly members and even of mayors of it being that somehow they are a step above. And I've never thought that. But I'm curious if you ever felt that.
Look, having wanted to be governor and having been around governors, being governor would be a great job as well. You can get a lot accomplished there. But being mayor, when I go to the grocery store, when I was mayor and I went to the grocery store, those were my constituents that I was dealing with. When I saw a problem in this, if a drain overflowed, that was something I could do something about. When you're governor, things are one step removed, and the lack of that immediacy is problematic. And the other challenge for Alaska is we've been dealing with the same damn problems for so long because we never really solved them, and that gets to be a little stale and a little frustrating. You're not anonymous as mayor. People see you and they know you. If you're out and around, I mean, that's up to how the mayor wants to do the job. You can be engaged everywhere, and I thought that was important. I mean, one of the things I learned as a minority leader, and one of the things I learned there was management by walking around. I just walk all over the place, talk to everybody, see what was going on, have a good sense of what was happening inside the universe that's the Capitol building. But you can do something like that around Anchorage. Go to the various departments and see what the people are doing. Make sure that you're visiting different parts of town and different events. You can be a lot of places and you can make your presence felt, and you can absorb a lot from where the people are. And Anchorage is an amazing city.
You were the first legislator to become mayor of Anchorage. Is that?
No.
Tom Fink.
Tom Fink was a legislator.
So you were the second.
But I had not been. I was the only one.
Was Tom Fink had been on the assembly?
Yeah, I'd never been on the assembly.
Okay. So I guess then that's how I thought about it, because I think it was assembly members who had told me that you were the only one who'd done that because you didn't. And I think from their perspective, that's not a positive thing.
No, it's not a good thing from their perspective. But from my perspective, it's really good, because one of the things that, people say, what's the mayor's report? I say, I got nothing to report. If I got something important that you haven't heard already, I'll tell you. And that happened on occasion. But I thought that the mayor's office was separate, as the executive was separate from the assembly, which was the legislative branch. And they both had to protect their turf pretty zealously. And when you blended them, that became problematic. I mean,
so you felt it was a benefit because you were more separate from the assembly than somebody who had served on the assembly.
That's right. I didn't want to be the 12th, it was then the 12th, but now the 13th assembly member, where I got engaged in debate with people. I just, that wasn't my job.
I want to talk about COVID, but before that, do you have a story you want to tell from before COVID as mayor?
One of the things about it's we got to do a lot of things. We did a climate action plan. We redesigned the bus route. We sold ML&P. We put the fiscal house back in order. When I ran on safe, secure, strong. That was the goal for Anchorage. We increased the size of the police department, and we made that as much more robust than it was be. We wanted to make sure that their fiscal situation was as balanced as possible. And we did a gas tax, which reduced property tax. People don't recognize that. And we sold ML&P, which was also hugely helpful. But I think what we also did was try and weld the city together and find the common threads that made us uniquely Alaskan and made us uniquely Anchorage. And I thought that was really important to talk about that and to be out there doing it and generate a sense of community. Mara came back from Juneau one time and said, one of the things that she met somebody who'd said, you want to live in a place that loves itself. And I wanted to make sure that Anchorage loved itself and that the sense of community here was palpable. And that becomes a goal that we haven't reached yet.
I mean, it upsets me because Jeff Landfield posts a lot in the last couple of years about Anchorage being a failed city, and posting what I view is yes, you can find video footage of bad things happening,
sure,
but it's not indicative of the entire city.
No, look, this is an incredible city. It is the biggest city in the country. It is a vertical city. It is really expensive to run because of the geography of where we are. But they do an amazing job. We have about the lowest tax rate of any major city in the country. And people go, oh, that's not true. It's yeah, our property taxes are kind of high, but we have a sales tax. You get a permanent fund dividend check. compare us to any other place in the country, we're doing pretty well. We just haven't invested in ourselves enough. And I think part of what's happened is the feds and the state have cut what had been support for local governments, not just Anchorage, and at the same time handcuffed local government's ability to raise revenue themselves or take the kind of actions that are necessary to provide for the safety and well-being of the public. And that has not happened to any great degree here.
So do you remember when you first started learning about COVID and like the day that you thought, well, this might be an issue for me as mayor of Anchorage?
There was a flight from Wuhan that came and landed here in Anchorage, and we knew right away that that was going to be a little bit challenging because we had to make sure that the people on that flight were taken care of, but at the same time, we weren't becoming, that it didn't become a conduit for transmitting the disease into Anchorage.
There were some really crazy assembly meetings as you guys started debating how Anchorage should respond. And there was one particular assembly meeting where there's like video footage of you trying to leave the building and people surrounding you and screaming and heckling and not being able to drive, you were in the car. And like
they followed us actually for quite a ways.
And somebody lied down in front of the vehicle and the vehicle couldn't come out.
These are very tense times for everybody. And I appreciate that the folks that were opposed to some of the quarantine orders that we were issuing, I understand their philosophical objections to them. But the first job you have as an elected, as a leader, is to protect your people. And given everything we knew at the time and the images we were seeing coming out of China, coming out of Italy about bodies stacking up and being stored in freezer trucks, is we can't do what other places do. We're an island. Alaska's essentially an island, and Anchorage is the one place where the rest of the state comes for medical care. And we had to do everything possible to make sure that we limited the spread of the disease and also took the time that was necessary to increase our capacity to respond to it.
This is like the most difficult part of this. I mean, like you had to resign as mayor, and I don't know how. I can't, and if I try to like put myself in your shoes, like I don't know how to come back from that.
So I did some really hurtful things that my choices that,
as all humans have. I mean, maybe not all humans have made that mistake, but I'm saying like many humans have.
I can't make excuses for what I did, and I take responsibility for my actions. And I have, and it's enabled me to repair my relationship with my family, which is really important. It just, I rendered myself incapable of providing the kind of leadership to the city that I thought Anchorage needed.
Like, particularly in the age of Donald Trump, that is not a terminal mistake. Or the age of Bill Clinton, or the age of John F. Kennedy. Like, there's a long history, and it just seems like, and this is like where I'm going to say some stuff that I probably can't keep in, but it's just like a Democratic thing, like what we did to Al Franken, where we completely excoriate and throw out because of mistakes that Republicans somehow find a way to turn a blind eye to.
Yeah, I mean, this is where politics was less important to me than falling below my personal standards of behavior.
I'm just guessing that the first few months must have been torture.
The weight of what I'd done to people I loved was crushing. But it was my doing, and taking responsibility for it sort of helped me get to a place where I can't undo the past.
Well, and you've repaired your relationship with your family. I'm curious, did you lose friends?
I don't say I lost friends, but I lost contact with a lot of people.
Do you feel like you've made the comeback?
I made it through, and I've rebuilt what are the most important relationships to me, which are my family. And I'm incredibly grateful that they've given me that. This was Andrew, this is like, I did bad things that I shouldn't have done, and I'm probably sorry for them.
So Kyle Johansson is my chief of staff.
Yep,
He
I know.
shared his story, and he talked about teachers at school for his kids showing the newspaper. He talked about his mother having people scream at her in the grocery store. And like, those are really hard stories for him to talk about, because, it's one thing for you to make a mistake, but then to have
My family paid the price for it.
And
That's my weight to carry. It's my weight to carry. It's not theirs.
so what are you doing now?
So what am I doing now? So both my parents have passed pretty recently, and so with my siblings, we're sorting through their lives and dealing with that. But for work, what I'm doing primarily is I'm working on a submarine fiber optic cable between Europe and Asia that runs through the Arctic. Hopefully, we'll find a way of connecting it to Alaska. We've tried. I think it's pretty critical. People want to do data center development and using gas in place. So that's been my primary project for the last couple of years.
So with the data center issue, I would say sort of the critique, I think, from the left is, climate change is real. How could we in Alaska, like the forefront of facing the consequences of climate change with villages literally falling into the water, how can we be talking about allowing these data centers that eat up enormous amounts of energy and increasing fossil fuel burning, that there just seems like a disconnect, that we might open Alaska up as being like the place for these data centers to be?
So it's going to happen somewhere. We know that that's the way of the world. If it happens in Alaska, we have the ability to manage it and regulate it and control it. And I also think that a lot of the political pushback against data centers can be ameliorated in Alaska. You do something behind the grid so it's not competing with locals for energy costs. You do something where you're re-injecting the carbon so it's not a contributor to climate change to the extent that it otherwise would be. And it becomes an opportunity for Alaska to develop the gas in place, which is going to be a lot more lucrative and a lot more likely than a gas pipeline.
Are you working on any deals for us to have data centers on the North Slope?
I'm working on a deal to make sure that we have the fiber connectivity that data centers need. My experience trying to coordinate with the state of Alaska has not been very happy. Ada in particular has been singularly difficult to deal with. And the governor's office is so consumed with gas line development that trying to get attention focused on this other option for developing gas is, and providing for Alaska's future, just not getting the traction I think it needs.
So if we had a data center, or data centers plural, on the North Slope using the gas in place, is there a vision that there would be enough profit there to pay for imports of gas to South Central? Like, I mean, like, I'm saying, like, how do we, like,
there's so many options for, you could do significant power centers on the North Slope and just run the electricity south. Think about this.
People talk about that, like, ship the electrons, not the gas.
That's right. It's molecules, electrons, and photons, right? Light, electricity, or gas. So use the gas in place. And this goes back to some of the things that I think are really important for people to wrestle with, thematic things. What are we doing to make sure that Alaska is self-reliant? And developing gas in place and adding value to resources in place, that's self-reliance. That helps cut off some of the colonial mindset that we're stuck in, that other people need to do things for us. So that's significant. The other thing is, this gas pipeline, which they're promoting now, it's 8 years before it's ready. What are we going to do for energy in the meanwhile? What's the future presence of a gas line going to do for the ability to find investment in things like waste to energy or community solar or wind? Or they're even talking about they're pumping $80 million into coal development here, and then there's There's all these hydro projects that are being promoted. What's going to happen to the funding for that? And so those are the alternatives to this gas pipeline.
Do you have any other suggestions for ways to fix things in Alaska?
I mean, I think globally, some of the big challenges we have in the country, which become visited in Alaska, is that we don't have enough local news sources, and we don't have community news. And so all the news we get is nationalized. That's problematic. I think it's problematic the way campaigns are funded right now. It's like there's too much money coming in. I mean, we're going to see tens of millions of dollars on a Senate race here. Just that's a lot of money to go for us poor folks up here in the North.
Well, how do you go back to the media thing? The problem is that, when you start to think about it as a business, are there enough subscribers? Are there enough people to pay for it in a smaller community in Alaska?
But you got to do something that builds the community of Alaska back together again. And that, I think, is really critical, because there's 750,000 Alaskans, but there's not enough of us to fight and thrive. We can fight or thrive. And so we got to find a way of coming together.
Ethan Berkowitz, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@aklec.gov or call 907-269-0123.